Hello and welcome to our channel, a place where we teach the economically disadvantaged families how to build a financial legacy the right way using property as a vehicle. In our previous channel video, we've looked at what financial legacy is and how it looks like. So basically we see how when one builds the right way, and the person benefits from that till his dying day. Not only that, but the legacy that he or she leaves is passed on to the children, and they live off that, they benefit from that. But also we looked at how if one does not plan for into the future, one does not set up a financial legacy in place, we see how they especially suffer in their old age. We see how eventually they begin to depend on other people for sustenance. They've depleted their retirement funds, and now they have to depend on some organization, some charity, some friends, their children, or any other handouts, to the point that they get so frustrated they don't see the reason why they should live, and before they know it, they just wish they were dead. And and before you know it, they obviously die because they don't see the sense or a need for living. So those are the two contrasts we see in those scenarios. But then before we dive into the how to build a legacy, financial legacy the right way, I want to allow me to tell a story of how I've been a victim, in the sense that my parents did not plan into the future, and how it affected my mother and how it affected us as children. So my dad had a very good career. I was told he was an accountant, and at some point he started working for himself and accumulated a few assets here and there. Somehow, one day he was attacked by some strangers. They beat him up and left him for dead. Some strangers picked him up, rushed him to the hospital, and they examined him. He had a lot of internal bleedings in his body, and unfortunately couldn't save him, and he died. So he dies when I'm 2 years old, and he left my mother pregnant with my young brother. And since we were living in the city, just after they buried my dad, she tells me, my mother told me that the relatives came and they got all that which my dad had built. They literally took everything. And she was not working, so she couldn't keep us in the city. So the only option, she looked everywhere for help, she couldn't get any help. So the only option she was left with was to go to her mother, who was in the village. So I went and stayed there in the village until I did my grade 1 and grade 2. That is when my uncle, the older brother to my mother, and his wife took me back into the city. So they kept me there until when I was about in grade 4, 5. my brother came in and joined us. And after a short period of time, my unfortunately my grandmother died, and before too long my mother remarried and got us a sister. Unfortunately, marriage didn't last for too long, and so she decided she had to find a way to take care of her children, or somehow contribute to the well-being of her children. So, being the fact that she had stayed in the village for some time and she would visit the city, she saw an opportunity. She saw how there was a need from the people in the village who needed things like soap, sugar, salt, clothes, blankets, etc. And so she would go buy those things in the city, bring them to the village. In exchange, she would be given products like agricultural, agricultural products like beans, rice, maize, things like that. So she would bring them in the village. She would bring them into town, into the city, sell them in the cycle containers. So she was very excited that she had found a very good business, and it worked for some time for her. And forward a little bit, when I was about 14 years old, yeah, my mother got sick. She had malaria. She got malaria, I think, mostly because of, of the places she would sleep in when she's, especially going to the villages and farms, collect the product. The places where they would sleep, was told it would used to have a lot of mosquitoes. So we gathered that that's where she got malaria. She was brought in the city, and unfortunately they couldn't help her. After some time, she died from malaria. So here I was at age 14, and my both parents were gone. And yeah, of course, I left nothing. And but thankfully, there was my uncle and my aunt who took care of us. But then 2 years later from then, just round about that time, my uncle retired, and yeah, so he began to struggle financially, and he had put his retirement money into some investments, some saving accounts of some sort. And 2 years later, he wanted to now access the money so that he could go and buy a house. So to his shock, he finds that the money that he was expecting wasn't there. He was told he had depleted his money. I said, how? There was a debate here and there. So he was frustrated. He got whatever had remained and went to look for a house he could buy. And he could only afford a house in the what we would call a location. In the so he went there and bought something that looked like a house. It had 4 walls. It had a roof. Yeah, no electricity, no water. But thankfully, we had a roof over our heads. he was very, very frustrated that the so-called financial gurus, really swindled him, told him lies, and yeah, unfortunately, never recovered from that disappointment. So uh, he didn't last very long. Before we knew it, he passed on from depression. And yeah, so uh, yeah, the place we had moved to was very far from school. We would literally walk 2 hours going to school and 2 hours coming back from school. And in the evenings, you then would then study using Kindle. It was quite a very difficult life, I must say. It was very hard. And thankfully, by the grace of God, we managed to at least reach grade 12. And I had an opportunity to go to the college, but unfortunately, I couldn't because I had to find work so that I can take care of those who were before me. That's what I did, and I believe I contributed my fair share. I sponsored them to school, and when they were done, that's when I could now focus on myself. I took myself through college. And so yeah, basically that's what it was. That's what we went through in our lives. And I'm telling this because number one, yeah, I've learned from that kind of life, and I don't want my family, I don't want my children to go through that kind of life. And by the grace of God, I've managed to structure some financial legacy, and I've put things in place. Should I die, my children will be able to benefit on what I have left. My wife doesn't have to go through the life of that of my mother, but she can remain and still live a decent life. And I am sharing this because I know that this is a typical life for us Africans. And that is why I want to extend the knowledge that I've acquired and extend it to those who are in need of it, especially the economically disadvantaged people and families. That is why I am here to put energies to inspire and educate and train them how they can build such a life to their benefit and the next generation. So, see you in the next video.